My name is Tara Simmons, and I am 29 years old. And I want to tell you about the Friday night I found out my best friend Jade had been dating my boyfriend Eli for 2 months, and what I did about it over the 9 months that followed, and the specific plot twist that happened when Eli called me in month 9, and I finally understood what getting him back actually meant. I want to start with who Eli was before I start with what Jade did, because the context matters. Eli and I had been together for 14 months when I found out. He was the kind of person who was very good at being present without being fully present, attentive in the visible ways while managing something internally that I had attributed to his personality rather than to a specific thing he was managing. I had loved him in the specific way you love someone you believe is the right fit because the surface fits while not yet having looked closely at the foundation. The foundation, I discovered on a Friday night in April, was not what I had believed it was. I found out from a screenshot. A mutual acquaintance, not Jade's friend specifically, but someone adjacent to both of us, had seen something she believed I should see and had sent it to me, without a message, just the image. A photo from Jade's private Instagram, posted for a limited audience that did not include me, of Jade and Eli at a restaurant I had been to with Eli twice. The photo was from 2 weeks ago. The caption was obscured in the screenshot, but the image was not ambiguous. The specific body language of two people who are not at a dinner between friends. I sat with my phone and the screenshot for a long time. I did not immediately feel the things I expected to feel. What I felt first was clarity, the specific disorienting clarity that arrives when something you have been half noticing but not looking at directly suddenly has a form. I called Jade. She answered. I asked her directly. She did not deny it. She said she was sorry. She said it had happened. She said she had not known how to tell me. I asked how long. She said 2 months. I said, 2 months? She said, yes. I said, okay. I said I needed to go. She said my name. I did not say anything else. I ended the call. Then I called Eli. He did not answer. He texted me an hour later. The text said he was sorry and that he had wanted to tell me and that he had not been brave enough. The word brave appearing in that context was the thing that clarified for me most completely what I was working with. I went to sleep. I woke up on Saturday and I cried, which was the appropriate response to the appropriate amount of grief. And I did it privately and completely, and by Sunday evening I had decided what I was going to do. I was not going to fight for Eli. I was not going to confront Jade beyond the Friday night phone call. I was not going to make any of what had happened into a public narrative. I was going to redirect. The redirecting was not a strategy I had planned. It was a decision I made on a Sunday evening based on the specific recognition that I had a finite amount of energy and a choice about where to put it. The options as I saw them were as follows. I could put the energy into the situation with Eli and Jade, into the confrontations and the conversations, and the social management of a rupture that had already happened and could not be repaired through energy expenditure. Or I could put the energy into something else entirely. I had been working for 3 years at a communications firm where I was a senior account manager. I had been doing work that was good enough to produce steady advancement and not quite focused enough to produce the specific recognition I had been building toward. The not quite focused enough was partly a function of where I had been putting the energy that could have been going somewhere else. After Sunday evening, the energy started going somewhere else. The first 3 months after the Friday were the most productive I had ever been professionally. Not because heartbreak is fuel in the inspirational sense, but because the specific amount of attention I had been giving to the relationship and to the friendship and to the social world those two things occupied was now available for reallocation, and I allocated it completely to my career. I pitched a project I had been hesitant to pitch for months. It was accepted. I delivered it better than I had planned, and the delivery produced an opportunity to pitch another one. And I pitched that one and delivered that one, and the pattern continued. By month 3, I had been promoted to director level. By month 5, my name was on projects that were getting attention from senior leadership in ways it had not been before. My social life shifted too, not dramatically, but genuinely. Without the relationship and the friendship at the center of it, I had space and time that I had not previously had, and I filled that space and time with things I had been meaning to do and had been deferring. A pottery class I had registered for twice and never attended. A running group I had joined and then quit because the timing had conflicted with something Eli wanted to do on Sunday mornings. A set of friendships I had been maintaining at low intensity because the high-intensity version had been Jade. By month 6, I had a life that was organized around my own preferences in a way it had not been organized since before the relationship. Not better in all ways. I missed the good parts of what Eli had been. I missed the good parts of what Jade had been before she had been what she turned out to be. But I was building something that fit me in a way the previous configuration had not quite fit. By month 7, Jade called me. Not about Eli specifically. She said she wanted to tell me that she and Eli had broken up. She said it had not worked out. She said she was sorry again and that she missed me. I said I appreciated her calling. I said I was doing well, and I said I was not ready to discuss the friendship further yet. She said she understood. We ended the call. 2 months later, Eli called. Eli called on a Thursday evening in January, 9 months after the Friday in April. I was at my desk finishing a presentation for the following morning when my phone showed his name. I had not thought about him in any active way for approximately 3 months. Not suppression, not avoidance. He had simply stopped occupying the mental real estate he had occupied because the mental real estate had been fully taken up with other things, and the reallocation had been successful enough that the previous tenant had not come back. I answered because I was curious about what 9 months would produce in a phone call from him, and because I had nothing to defend or manage in the conversation, and curiosity was the honest reason. He said, "Tara." I said, "Eli." He said, "I wanted to call." I said, "Okay." He said, "I have been thinking about what I did and I wanted to tell you I am sorry." I said, "I know." He said, "You know?" I said, "I knew you would be sorry at some point." He was quiet for a moment. I said, "That is not a criticism, it is just accurate." He said, "I made a mistake." I said, "Yes?" He said, "A big one." I said, "Yes?" He said, "I was thinking that maybe we could talk sometime, maybe get coffee." I considered the coffee invitation for a moment, not whether I wanted to go, which I knew relatively quickly, but how to describe why I did not want to go in a way that was honest rather than just final. I said, "Eli, I want to tell you something honestly." He said, "Okay." I said, "I have spent the last 9 months building a life that is better than the one I had when you were in it." I said, "That is not a statement about you as a person. It is a statement about what happened when I redirected the energy I had been putting into us into other things." He was quiet. I said, "I do not want coffee." I said, "Not because I am angry. I am genuinely not angry at this point." I said, "Because the version of me you are imagining when you ask for coffee is the version that existed 9 months ago, and she has moved on in the literal sense of the phrase." I said, "I am a different person with a different life, and the coffee you are imagining would be a very confusing conversation for both of us." He said, "You sound different." I said, "I am different." He said, "Better?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I am glad." He said it with a quality that I believed was genuine, which was more than I had expected. I said, "I know you are." I said, "I appreciate you calling." He said, "I feel like I should have done things differently." I said, "You should have." I said, "And I am genuinely glad you did not, because the 9 months I had because you did not is what I would not trade." He was quiet again. Then he said, "That is an unexpected answer." I said, "It is an honest one." We ended the call. I went back to my presentation. I want to tell you about the moment I understood what the phrase "getting him back" actually meant, because this story is supposed to be about getting him back, and the phrase deserves an honest examination rather than the meaning that the story title implies. Getting someone back in the conventional sense means restoring a previous state, returning the relationship to what it was before the disruption, getting back the person, the dynamic, the specific configuration that existed before Friday night in April. I did not want the previous state. The previous state was a relationship with someone who had been lying for 2 months while being good at appearing present. The previous state was a friendship with someone who had been taking from me while performing closeness. The previous state was a version of myself who was doing work that was good enough and not quite focused enough, and not building at the rate she was capable of because the energy was distributed across things that did not serve her growth. Getting Eli back in the conventional sense would have required returning to the previous state. I had no interest in the previous state. What I did instead was get back the version of myself that the previous state had been preventing, the director-level professional, the person who shows up to the pottery class and the running group, and the friendships she maintains at full intensity rather than low intensity. The person whose life is organized around her own preferences rather than around the preferences of people whose preferences had been prioritized at her expense. That was what I got back, not Eli, myself. The plot twist in this story is not that I ended up with Eli after 9 months of building something extraordinary. The plot twist is that the 9 months of building something extraordinary meant that when the call came, I genuinely did not want the thing I had been told the story was about. I thought about that on the Thursday evening after I ended the phone call with Eli and went back to my presentation. I had heard the phrase "getting him back" before I found out about Jade and Eli, in the conversation my roommate had with me on the Saturday morning when I was crying, in the context of what she assumed I would do. She had said, "You should find a way to get him back." She had meant restore the relationship. She had not known, and I had not known at the time, that getting him back was going to mean something entirely different. Getting him back meant getting back the energy, the attention, the time, the professional capacity, the social preferences that had been going into a relationship that was built on something that was not what I believed it was. Getting him back meant redistributing all of those things to myself. Getting him back was the best thing that happened to me in 9 months, and Eli had nothing to do with it. I saw Jade once, about 3 months after the Eli phone call. Not planned. We were at the same coffee shop, a place we had gone to often when we were still friends, and she was there when I arrived. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. There was a pause where both of us were deciding what the next few minutes were going to look like. Then I walked over to her table, because walking over to her table was the honest thing to do, and I had been choosing honesty as a consistent practice since April. I said, "Hey." She said, "Hey." I asked if I could sit for a minute. She said yes. We talked for about 20 minutes, not about Eli, who was irrelevant to what we had been to each other before him, about us. About what the friendship had been and what had happened to it and what she was working through. She was honest in a way that cost her something. She said she had taken from me because she had believed it was available and had not fully understood that taking from someone who offers you things freely is still taking. She said she had confused my generosity with permission. I said, "I know." I said, "I think I enabled some of that by not having clear enough ideas about what was mine and what was shareable." She said, "That is generous of you to say." I said, "It is accurate." She asked if there was a path back to the friendship. I thought about it. I said, "I do not know yet." I said, "The friendship before April was built on some things that were real and some things that were not, and rebuilding it requires knowing which was which, and I have not finished working that out yet." She said, "That is fair." She said, "I will wait." I said, "I know you will." We stood up. We hugged in the specific, careful way of people who once knew each other completely and are now learning what they are to each other at a new distance. It was not a warm hug. It was an honest one, which is sometimes better. I walked home and I thought about everything the 12 months since April had produced: the promotion, the projects, the running group and the pottery class, and the friends I was investing in fully. The phone call with Eli, where I had told him honestly that I was glad things had happened the way they had. The coffee shop conversation with Jade, where I had said the things that were true instead of the things that would have made the moment easier. The story that people expect when a best friend steals a boyfriend is a story about restoration or about revenge, getting back what was taken, making the person who took it pay. The story I actually lived was a story about redirection, taking the energy that the betrayal generated and putting it somewhere that compounded. The epic way I got him back was by not getting him back, by getting myself instead, by spending 9 months building something so genuinely good that the phone call from the man who had chosen wrong was an interruption to my presentation rather than the call I had been waiting for. That is the most epic version of this story, not the dramatic one, the true one. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.